I actually see quite a lot of exited founders find their purpose in the family first.
Yeah.
It's kind of the easiest. So they focus on the family. I did that as well. And for a while, it really satisfies this search for meaning. I guess it feels very meaningful because for me, at the end of the day, what's meaningful is when you give yourself, when you serve someone else.
Yeah.
It's bigger than you. So that meaning is always that, but we grow out of different stages.
Yeah.
So at some point I still, was very focused on my children. I love them, but I started feeling, okay, there is something else I need to do.
Yeah.
And by that time, I already knew that it had to be something not selfish.
Yeah.
And I read enough to understand that spirituality really is our growth from our ego, from our selfish to selfless. But it takes time. We can't just decide, now I'm this selfless being. It's I call it spiritual fitness. It's something that you do in a manner very similar to physical fitness. You learn a few rules, how to do it efficiently, and then it's about being disciplined every day and doing it. For some people, it's meditation, gratitude. There are tools that have been known to humanity forever as how to do it. But it's training yourself to be less selfish. And then I think purpose, in a way, reveals itself when you're ready.
That's interesting. One of the things I've been reading a lot about is that final point you said about it would reveal itself when it's ready. It will come, that sort of vibe. I find that really hard to almost say, just be in a moment or work on yourself and the right thing would come to you rather than go and create that right thing.
Well, but you can give yourself permission to not know to start with. So you relax and you don't worry about it too much.
Yeah.
And then you just work on your fitness, right? Because if you think about physical fitness, you don't expect that if you work out for 5 hours, you'll be ready to go to the Olympics. It's exactly the same thing. And I think you can apply it to you're thinking about business as well. You mentioned it before. It's really that everyday work. And it's the same in a way with spirituality. But if we haven't grown up religious, and like you, I haven't grown up in a religious family, we have to find that formula for ourselves that works. But purpose is a spiritual thing. It is about being ready to serve other people. And it happens with age, with experiences, with spiritual practices, with understanding how it all works. You can't push it. Like you can't push being physically fit in one day.
Yeah.
But you can think about it in a way very similar to what you were saying about manifesting your dream. You can know the direction, right? So my direction is there just because I know it's there. And if you're religious, it helps to have faith.
Yeah.
So you just believe it's there because you have that faith. If you're not religious, it's much harder because you have to do that work to create conviction.
Yeah.
And for me, for example, I create conviction if something is very logical, undeniable. I like going back to first principles and making sure intellectually it's very logical. And then I have conviction.
That's interesting.
That's what works for me because I don't have faith just by default.
That's interesting. And that's kind of thinking from first principle. Okay, well, what's a recent belief you've had that you have got rid of because it didn't logically make sense to you?
Well, I believe, for example, that at its core, motivation simply comes when we want to get away from suffering and we move towards what we conceive as what we think is pleasure. So moving from suffering towards pleasure. Yeah. And if you think about it, we can manipulate it quite a bit. So we can focus on how much we hate a particular situation. For example, you know it very well. You hated your poverty.
Yeah.
And then you created a dream and you were both pushed and pulled.
Yeah.
Pushed by suffering, pulled by that dream. And to me, that's really first principle. This is simply how desires, how motivation works. And then I feel very empowered because then I focus on creating that dream, focusing on that suffering, and then I'm driven. That's just an example of how I think about first principles. Instead of, for example, a more popular way of thinking about it, decide what it is you want as opposed to what other people want from you. It's all very confusing for me. I need to have a very clear, simple mental model that makes sense, that's based on first principles, it's logical, and then I believe in it. So, for example, talking about serving other people, to me, it comes from very first principles because it's natural for us to want to serve others. We are tribal animals. So people are born very selfish. Then once we take care of ourselves, we naturally want to take care of others. That's when we fall in love, we have children, and then we want to give our knowledge to the next generation. So that circle of those we serve naturally grows, because what the nature wants us, it wants us to survive, and it wants us to help our species to survive. So it's very primal that we want to serve other people. So it's more about being aware of it and cultivating understanding of it and accepting that fact than coming up with some fancy theories that are not based on how nature works.